In psychology, three dark personality traits get most of the attention. The narcissist, the psychopath, and the Machiavellian. Loud, obvious, easy to point at. But there is a second group, a quieter group, that researchers say does just as much damage and almost nobody talks about. They call it the vulnerable triad: covert narcissism, everyday sadism, and spitefulness. If we were to ask the three who has the most hidden personality, the covert narcissist would say, "You would never guess." The sadist would say, "It doesn't matter. You'll find out." And the spiteful one would say, "I'd rather lose than let you win." People who score high on these three traits don't usually end up on the news. They end up in your group chat, in your family system, in the comment section under your post, in the meeting room where someone keeps making everyone else's idea fail. This is why, in the last 10 years, the vulnerable triad has become one of the fastest-growing research areas in clinical psychology. Here is an overview of what we know. The covert narcissist is the easiest of the three to miss. He doesn't strut. He doesn't brag. From the outside, he often looks shy, modest, even self-deprecating. But underneath that quiet surface is the same engine that drives the loud narcissist. A fragile, hungry self that needs to be special. The difference is the strategy. The grandiose narcissist demands admiration. The covert one waits for it. He plays the victim. He drops hints. He sighs at the right moment so you ask him what is wrong, and then he punishes you for asking the wrong way. The research shows that covert narcissists are more anxious, more depressed, and more easily wounded than their grandiose cousins. But that wound is also the weapon. When they feel slighted, even by something invisible to everyone else in the room, the resentment can last for years. But that is not what makes them dangerous. What makes them dangerous is that you almost never know you are dealing with one. They look like the quiet, good person in the corner. By the time you realize the pattern, you are already inside it. The everyday sadist is the second member of the triad, and the word everyday matters. We are not talking about the criminals you see in films. We are talking about the coworker who enjoys watching you squirm in a meeting, the driver who speeds up when someone tries to merge, the internet stranger who finds the cruelest possible reply and feels a small private smile when they hit send. Researchers were stunned by how common this trait turned out to be. In one well-known study, people high in everyday sadism volunteered to grind insects alive in a coffee grinder when given the option of cleaner tasks. They didn't have to. They wanted to. They scored highest on enjoyment afterward. The defining feature of the everyday sadist is not anger. It is pleasure. Pleasure at someone else's discomfort. And because the world gives so many small chances for that pleasure, the trait rarely needs a dramatic outlet. It feeds itself in small bites, every day, and the person carrying it usually doesn't see anything wrong with it. The third member is the most surprising: spitefulness. For a long time, psychologists didn't think of it as a personality trait at all. It was just behavior. Then, in 2014, a research team built the first proper scale to measure it. And what they found changed the field. Some people are willing to harm themselves, financially, socially, even physically, just to make sure someone else gets hurt too. They will quit a job to ruin a manager. They will burn a friendship to punish a slight. They will lose money in a negotiation as long as the other side loses more. The spiteful mind runs on a different math. It would rather have less if the rival has even less than that. What ties these three together is something deeper than meanness. It is the way each one chooses to absorb pain so they can deliver it back. The grandiose narcissist defends his ego with a wall. The vulnerable narcissist defends it with a wound. The Machiavellian plays the long game for advantage. The sadist plays the short game for pleasure. The psychopath feels nothing. The spiteful person feels everything and uses it as fuel. This is why researchers separate the loud, dark triad from this quieter, vulnerable one. The damage is similar. The mechanism is not. Now here is where it gets uncomfortable. Genetics matter. Twin studies suggest that all three of these traits have moderate heritability, with covert narcissism and sadistic tendencies showing the clearest genetic signal. But unlike the bold, dark triad, the vulnerable triad seems to need the environment to switch it on. A neglectful parent, an unstable home, years of feeling small in a place where someone else was always allowed to feel big. The seed is biology, the soil is childhood, and the harvest often is an adult who learned that the safest way to feel powerful is to make someone else feel weak. If we line these three up against the Big Five personality model, the picture sharpens. All three score very low on agreeableness, just like the bold, dark triad. But unlike the bold version, they also score high on neuroticism. They feel a lot. They feel rejection in places where there was no rejection. They feel competition in places where no one was competing. The covert narcissist runs on shame. The sadist runs on contempt. The spiteful person runs on resentment. And those three engines, shame, contempt, and resentment, are some of the most stable, slow-burning emotions a human brain can produce. There is also an evolutionary case. Our ancestors lived in small groups where status was scarce and visibility was dangerous. Being loud and dominant worked for some. But for others, the safer path was to stay invisible, gather information, and strike only when the cost to themselves was low and the cost to the rival was high. Spitefulness, in particular, may have evolved as a kind of social leveler, a way for the weaker member of the group to make sure the stronger one didn't get to enjoy his win in peace. In a small tribe, that strategy could survive. In a modern office, in a modern family, in a modern comment thread, it can quietly destroy entire systems. This is why all three traits are surprisingly well represented in places we don't usually associate with darkness. Not in prisons, in committees, in friend groups, in long marriages that look fine from the outside. The loud, dark triad climbs the ladder. The vulnerable triad sits in the chair next to you and watches. But there are also costs to carrying these traits. People high on the vulnerable triad report more loneliness, more chronic anxiety, more drug and alcohol use, more thoughts of self-harm, and shorter relationships, even when they get exactly the social outcomes they were aiming for. Whatever the strategy returns on the outside, it seems to take more from the inside. And that, oddly, is the closest thing the research gives us to hope, because if the cost is internal, the door out is internal too. Therapy, awareness, slow rewiring of the shame response. None of it is fast. All of it is possible. So when you spot one of these patterns in someone in your life, the move is not to win. It is to step back. Watch. Name the pattern privately to yourself. Protect your time, your energy, and your reputation, because the vulnerable triad's favorite weapon is the slow leak, not the loud explosion. And when you spot one of these patterns in yourself, which most thoughtful people eventually do, the move is the same. Step back, watch, name it, then choose in that one small moment not to feed it. What about you? Did you grow up around any of these three? Or did you maybe, in a quiet season of your life, become one of them yourself? There is no shame in the answer. There is only what you decide to do with it. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and check the description for the studies, the scales, and the deeper reading. The dark triad gets the headlines. The vulnerable triad gets the rest of your life. Which one are you really watching for?